On the Talkback Show, on the radio, or whatever audiovisual device you choose to use. Welcome to the GBC podcast, where we talk about the Packers and our hometown of Green Bay. We are the official podcast of the Lot 1 Tailgate Party, which is at Lambeau Field every home game. This is episode 81, created September 3rd, 2024. I'm John. I'm in Appleton, Wisconsin. Along with me, Jeff in Minnesota, Neil out on the East Coast. Say hello, gentlemen, and tell us what you're drinking.
Hello, gentlemen. Tonight I'm drinking Odd Sides Hazel's Nuts Imperial Stout.
Because we are playing the Eagles, it seems appropriate that I should choose America's oldest brewery, or they like to think of themselves. This is considered to be a craft beer and one of the greatest beers ever in Pennsylvania. However, it sucks ass. And so I needed to clean my throat with Miller High Life. The champagne of beers is going to be a much better taste. But my beer tonight is going to a theme of Green City from Other Half Brewery, a double dry hopped hazy IPA.
How are you going to follow that, John?
All right, are we sure he's done? I am just quite simply drinking an amaretto sour. Thank you, Neil. You can find us on YouTube and Twitter at Green Bay Chat and Facebook at the GBC Podcast, Green Bay Chat. And just the audio is available on Apple Podcast as well as Spotify by searching for Green Bay Chat. We are getting ready for week one of the NFL season. Our Green Bay Packers are traveling to the country of Brazil, Sao Paolo, the city in particular, to face the Philadelphia Eagles. It is a neutral site international game, Philadelphia being the home team for this matchup. And really, that's all we have to talk about this week is taking a look at this game and what our expectations are for week one of this season between the Packers and the Eagles. We made our season predictions on the last episode, so we all kind of know where each of us lies on this one. So let's talk about why we think the Packers are going to do what we think that they are going to do this week. Neil, you had a whole bunch of strengths and weaknesses in the last episode that you saw in this Packers team. But what about the Eagles team? What has your research told you to expect from this Nick Sirianni team in Philadelphia?
Well, Nick Sirianni's on a little bit of a hot seat in Philadelphia because of how last season went, starting out 10-1 and then finishing the season at 11-7, including the playoffs. And that's what Eagles fans are just wondering. They want to really forget the way last season ended, but I don't know that the players are going to be able to forget it quite so easily. And I just want to remind you how they finished up at that 10-1. They beat Kansas City, the team that they had played the previous Super Bowl, to go to 9-1, and then beat the Bills to go to 10-1. And so this is a team that seemed to be really riding on a high streak before completely falling apart, losing to the Giants, losing to Arizona, getting destroyed by San Francisco, getting destroyed by Dallas, and then getting annihilated by Tampa Bay in the playoffs. And so the question is, are they going to be able to turn this around? Obviously, they've got some different players. They looked at some of their strengths and weaknesses, but I just want to emphasize how bad the failure of the Eagles was last year. There have been 65 teams since 1950 that have started a season 10-1. The Eagles are the only team in that group to both fail to win its division and fail to win a playoff game. The closest you come to that are the 1986 Jets, who went from 10-1 and 10-6, but at least they won a playoff game. So this is a team that really was reeling. And I think one of the things about this is it's not entirely clear that that was not an appropriate overall outcome as far as the season is concerned. And including the playoffs, Philadelphia was actually -18 in point differential last year. That's actually worse than those 2022 Phantom Vikings team that was -10.
So you're saying the bar is pretty low this year for them to come back? It sounds like they were so demoralized that anywhere they can go is up.
I mean, it's Eagles fans, right? So they're going to have higher expectations. And the fact is the Eagles ownership, certainly they've got one of the best ownership groups in the NFL. And what did they do in this offseason? They got a new offensive coordinator in Kellen Moore, who had previously failed as a head coach, but extremely successful offensive coordinator. And they got Vic Fangio, a successful defensive coordinator. So they made plans as far as how they were going to improve, certainly on the coaching staff, and they also made other changes.
And Neil, you mentioned new players. I think there are two new players on this Philadelphia team in particular that Packer fans are probably going to be looking at, and that's their first-round draft pick, Quinion Mitchell, the cornerback out of Toledo, taken 22nd overall, and then Cooper DeJean, the cornerback taken out of Iowa in the second round, 40th overall. Two players that I think Packer fans really, really wanted to get drafted. Two players where there's a jump, there's a move to kind of snatch them out from the Packers. And we talked about maybe the subterfuge that was involved in that. But definitely looking at these two young players and where they are on the depth chart right now, they're both listed as nickelbacks, with Mitchell being the number one nickelback, DeJean being the number two. And I think there was a lot of question on where he was going to be between cornerback and safety. So granted, they're young players. We're not expecting either of them to have an all-star performance in week one of this season, but I think that people are still going to be looking to see what it is that Mitchell and DeJean do in the backfield for this Eagles team.
John, I'm going to disagree with you there. The Packers didn't pick them. I don't give a shit. What I would say more importantly, though, is that the Eagles had a strategy that looked a lot like what the Packers strategy is. They recognized that they had weaknesses, and Darius Slay is 33 years old. Obviously somebody who's once a great player, but has fallen off quite a bit. James Bradbury being another one of these older players. And they basically said, we need to go to a youth movement. And I think that's one of the things that hopefully we're going to be able to exploit, either a dead old number of players in the secondary or youth and inexperience. Either way, when you've got the receiving core and tight end core that we have, this seems like something you go right after.
So, Neil, are you thinking it's going to be a high-scoring game then?
It's early in the season, right? And you never know how early season games are going to go. The offense certainly has not had those same number of game-type reps. And so, as we talked about last year, the defense tends to have an advantage earlier on in the season. And that, to me, is what actually is the most exciting part about this game, is seeing how our defense is going to try to go after the star power that the Eagles have. And specifically, how do we stop Jalen Hurts, a player who obviously has a lot of ways that he can burn you? How do you stop A.J. Brown? How do you stop Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert? They've got this big three as far as receivers are concerned. They've added Saquon Barkley as well for entertainment purposes. And how are we going to scheme against those players is going to tell us how the game is going to go.
And I'm glad you mentioned Saquon Barkley, because I wanted to throw him in there as well, because this is a player who 2 years ago on the New York Giants in that game in London had a spectacular performance that kind of took the wind out of the sails of the Packers defense in that game, and not just as a running back, but as a receiving running back. And he did really well in that game, right? And it's one of those things, he's only 2 years older. I think he's still, 28 years old in his seventh season. He's not that old, still a lot of a life in him. So now you have to look at how strong that offensive line is for the Eagles, right? Because everything starts up front. Jason Kelsey retires, but they also had drafted a guy 2 years ago named Cam Jurgens, who I think they said, this is the guy that we want to be the heir apparent. They knew Jason probably was retiring soon. Now he moves into that role at center, and we'll see what happens with this Eagles team. Like you said, they have Jalen Hurts. They have some great names on that offense. And the question is whether the Packer defense is ready. We don't know what this Packer defense looks like, because Jeff Hafley told us we're not going to show you what the Packer defense looks like in the preseason. It has been very vanilla. And so we are definitely waiting to see what happens with this new 4-3 scheme, what Hafley has ready to go for Friday night.
Well, my hope is that the defense takes control and rattles Hurts early. That seems to be a key where Jalen Hurts has problems and starts throwing up interceptions or gets frisky feet. If pressure is applied early in the game, early and often, it's a lot easier just to create mayhem on the defense. And that's what I'm hoping we see. Again, the Eagles, just like the Packers, offense hasn't really played together now in a year. We saw how their year ended on certainly a down note, whereas our offense ended certainly on a high note. So that's why I'm hoping the defense really takes over here. Might we see a high scoring game? Maybe. And I'm sure that's what the NFL wants in an international game. But I think it's going to come down to turnovers and really the defense, who is better at imposing their will and putting pressure on the quarterback.
Yeah, I'm not as encouraged about our ability to rattle Hurts. He's now in his fifth year. He's a player who's got good experience, and I'll say a few things about Hurts in a bit. But I think our opportunity on defense is the fact that they've got these big names as far as the top playmakers on offense, but that's really all they have. So A.J. Brown last year had 1,456 yards and 7 touchdowns. Devontae Smith had 1,066 yards. but they had no other wide receiver over 200 yards last year. Dallas Goedert, again, good, but 592 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's not some overwhelming tight end capability. They've got the stars, but if we can hold their stars in check, then we've got an opportunity to force them to find players that they couldn't find all of last year.
I would agree that, yeah, early in the season, I think the defense maybe has the advantage there. I think we saw a little bit more of the Packer defense anyway in preseason as well. And I think we're very excited about our front four, or the 8 guys that are rotating in the front four that are going to really start a lot of things up front for Green Bay. The thing that I'm concerned about is the way Green Bay treated the preseason again this year. And it's something that we've seen in recent years, last year being maybe an exception to it because Jordan Love's first year and the Bears being the week 1 opponent. They came out ready to play, but the week 1 game in the years prior to that, and the fact that I think that Green Bay just didn't put as much into the preseason this year, I'm definitely concerned about the Packer offense. So if the Eagle defense, even without Fletcher Cox, thankfully he retired, right?
Right.
But even without him, they still have some players out there. You mentioned Darius Slay, Neil, but hey, don't forget CJ Gardner-Johnson back there at safety as well. They've got some good young guys that are jumping in on that defensive line in Bryce Huff, Jordan Davis, right, that are ready to go. Where do you see the quarterback comparisons there? Well, we know what Love can do. We just didn't see a lot of it in the preseason. What can Love do versus what Hurts can do?
Well, Hurts's biggest strength is certainly his ability to move the ball with his legs as well. And the fact that he had 15 rushing touchdowns on 650 rushing yards last year is something that is a remarkable, and that makes him a fantasy football star. But the fact of the matter is that his rushing totals have gone down every year, as you might expect. So 2 years prior, he was at 784 rushing yards. You assume as he gets older, he's going to have fewer opportunities where he's going to run. He's going to be focused more on the passing. And if we look at Jalen Hurts' passing numbers last year, he was 65% completion. He had a career high of 3,858 yards. He had a career high of 23 passing touchdowns, a career high also of 15 interceptions. Also had 36 sacks. This is somebody who, if you look at those numbers, you say, this is not somebody who's a top quarterback in the NFL. And the danger we have, going back to what you're saying about week 1 and the team not being ready, is we're going to be doing a lot of stunts to try to rattle the Philadelphia offense. But those stunts that we're doing that we don't have a lot of practice on, or we have no practice on in game speed, those stunts are exactly areas that Jalen Hurts is going to be able to exploit. All of a sudden, there are going to be gaps. And if we're rushing this way and Hurts goes that way, Hurts takes off down the field. And those opportunities for explosive plays is something that I think is an inherent danger of a Hafley defense. But I think it's especially a danger against somebody like Jalen Hurts.
But do you think he's going to come out that sharp again, game speed, as the first game of the year? I mean, he's going to be rusty too. He hasn't had his reps. And I think the one advantage that our defense has is speed, youth and speed. So, if he does break out or if an assignment is blown, can they cover that with the athleticism versus the scheme?
That's a great question, Jeff. I think my counter to you, though, about Jalen Hurts starting out rusty is that he's in his 5th year as a starting quarterback. It's very different from somebody who is, say, starting his 2nd year as a starting quarterback. And I think that is an advantage for Jalen Hurts. But yes, just to point out, if you look at all of the top line quarterbacking numbers for last year, Love, 4,159 yards passing to only 3,800 plus for Hurts. Love, 32 touchdowns to 23 for Hurts. Love, 11 interceptions to 15 for Hurts. Fewer sacks as well. Yes, he had fewer rushing yards, but if we're looking at pure quarterbacking, throwing ball ability, we've got a big advantage with Jordan Love. And I want to go back to last week's episode, actually, in that when we talked about the strengths of the team, none of the 3 of us actually mentioned Jordan Love as one of the strengths of their team because it was so self-evident that obviously he is the strength of the team. But yes, Jordan Love is a strength of the team, and we're going to see opportunities for Jordan Love to take advantage with whatever wide receivers are able to create space in this game.
Your point of experience, I think, is what I probably lean towards. Being a 5th-year player, the preseason probably is not as much of a needed thing for Hurts. And again, this is a team that, right, they started out strong last year, like we said, 10-1, a team that starts out strong. Packers, a team that do not always start out strong. And even last year, Jordan Love struggled to start the season for the most part, and they came on strong late. Are we relying on how the team's finished to say that that's how it should carry over, possibly. But I think that the way the Packers team rhythms throughout the year is probably going to be the same thing again. Like I said, coming out of the preseason, maybe treating the week 1 game even as a preseason game, still trying to get everything together. We don't know what is going to be unique about the defense, and we don't know what's going to be unique about the offense, right? We really haven't even seen Josh Jacobs as far as a running back goes to know what he's going to bring to this team when they get on the field. We have confidence in our offensive line to make things work. But again, I just, that's what I come back to is maybe that years of experience. How necessary is it in week 1? And that's why I think that Philadelphia is probably going to come out a little stronger in this game.
And building on this question about differences in experience level, the photo we've got posted is from the last time the Packers played the Eagles in 2022. That was the big Jordan Love to Christian Watson breakout game while Aaron Rodgers was still the starting quarterback. And if you go back to that game from 2022, there are exactly 4 players on our offense that were playing in that game: Jordan Love, Christian Watson, Elgton Jenkins, and Josh Myers. That's it. Everyone else on the offense is a turnover from the players who were in that game.
Wow. So youth is served, but to put this all together, because the Packers ended on such a high note, going further than everybody expected, right? They won their first playoff game definitively. They really ended the season on a high note, everybody learning, everybody continuously getting better. Whereas Philadelphia, they were great in the first part of the year, obviously 10-1, but when, they just choked at the end. What is it? Injuries, with whatever it was, they ended the season very poorly. So for me, this becomes almost a must-win game for Philadelphia. So are they going to be pressing? Are they going to be, it's a neutral site, right? So that it's literally a foreign country for all involved. So there's no advantage, the Philly fans or whatever. So I think as a must-win game, I'm hoping that even experience, that may not necessarily work for them. Are they going to be pressing? Are they going to be tight? Again, it's the first game. Whereas youth and maybe the lack of experience is going to help them, but certainly the speed, kind of the chaos that the defense can bring, or that we're expecting to see, maybe not right away, but who knows? If we see that in this game, I think that's going to be the differentiator. And I obviously picked them to win, and that's what I'm looking forward to, is just this kind of, they're going to play free, they're going to play loose, whereas really all the pressure is on Philadelphia as a must-win game.
We do have, once again, the youngest team in the league. Whether you wear that badge as an honor or you say you're still building and growing, I don't know, but it worked out for them last year. But to that point that Neil made, in the 2022 game, Christian Watson was in that game. He's in his 3rd year, and I've kind of been longstanding in the belief that with wide receivers, that 3rd season is the breakout season. I've never been big on the rookie wide receiver. Jaden Reed changed me of that last year because he had such a phenomenal year. Part of that is maybe because of a lack of that number 1 around him, or whatever the case may be last year. But this is going to be, or this has to be, the season for Christian Watson to show why he was picked where he was, why he, was considered a young player that is going to grow, that they were going to be able to groom into this position. And we've seen flashes, right? We've certainly seen a lot of things with the 3 touchdown games, the speed, the breakaway speed, things like that. So if he really emerges this season, that will be spectacular. And because it's his 3rd season, this is the year to do it.
Dobbs is also in that 3rd season. And so, yeah, we've got opportunities all over the place for people to have breakout years.
And to continue on talking about a breakout player, a breakout performance, because we haven't seen a lot in the preseason, what are we looking at to say, I want to hang my hat on this? And I think it's got to be the running game. I think that Josh Jacobs has to show why they invested so much into him, why they easily let Aaron Jones go. Remember, the few short hours of the Josh Jacobs, Aaron Jones era in Green Bay was sublime. I mean, it was something like, wow, this is going to be the greatest 1-2 running attack in the history of the league. And then he's in Minnesota. So because of that, I want to see Josh Jacobs just light up the field on Friday night.
Quay Walker is another 3rd-year player for the Packers. And talking about somebody who's ready to make a leap, he's clearly got all of the physical tools. He's been trying to put all of the pieces together that's involved in playing in the middle of that defense. I think this is the year that he does it. I think this is the game where he steps into the bright lights of the NFL.
I'm going to go actually with a second-year player that I would like to see step up, also on defense. One, Lucas Van Ness. I want to see this guy just be the next J.J. Watt. I mean, is he? Probably not. But you know what? I want to see him with his hand on the ground and really put a lot of pressure on the quarterback. I want this guy to have 2-3 sacks in this game, have his teammates rally around him, and to really be a force on this team.
That's probably a point, Jeff, great point of this, the Packer defense that I've wanted for years. Not only are they getting younger, but they're getting faster. Boy, have I wanted a faster defense for a long time, and we saw it last year, and I think that, yeah, this will be a great year to see a much faster defense as well. Jeff, one guy that I was expecting you to throw out there, Braden Narvison. Do we need Braden Narvison to prove himself on Friday night?
Hopefully we won't need him. The game won't be close, but if the game is close, I tell you what, he seems to be a fan favorite. He's saying all the right things, and he married a lady from Wisconsin, right?
But talk about living your life under a microscope right now. Holy cow.
Well, you know what? He's been good. His sample size, at least in the pros, is, well, preseason. But in college, he kicked well. And you know what? He seems like a guy that you want to rally around, and you want him to do the best he can. And hopefully, again, if the game comes down to his right foot, he will make the kick.
We will find out shortly. And that game Friday night is in the country of Brazil, in Sao Paulo. This is a long flight from Green Bay to Brazil. The game itself is going to be 9:15 p.m. local time, 7:15 p.m. Central time in the Green Bay market. I kind of wish the team had flown on Tuesday. It sounds like, Neil, they're flying on Wednesday. You're the world traveler. What do you think that this travel plan is going to do for this team Friday night?
Well, first of all, I'm happy they're at least traveling on Wednesday rather than it would usually be traveling on Thursday, which is not something I favor as far as how Matt LaFleur does things. But 2 days before is better than 1 day before. But having flown to Europe many times and having flown to South America as well, even though it's a longer flight, it's an 11-hour flight, that actually ends up working out better because it is close enough to the same time zone. As far as time zone differences, it's only a 2-hour difference from Green Bay. And that essentially becomes like flying from Green Bay to Los Angeles as far as getting your body clock off. And having your clock, but your body clock off is a big deal. Jet lag is a real thing. You're off by 2 hours. That's not something that's significant. People do this all the time. And the long time on the flight means that they've got time to, yes, they're going to be bored a little bit, but they've got time to sleep. They've got time to look at film, whatever. But it's a block that they're going to be able to not be as disrupted by as if they were flying to Europe. Obviously, that applies to both teams, not just the Packers. But I think that the concerns about jet lag are much less than they would be than for a game in Europe.
The local news, Neil, in Green Bay did give a quick weather report for Friday night. It's going to be well after sunset. They are expecting 58 degrees kickoff temperature in Sao Paulo.
It's fall comes early, I guess, even though it's spring, but let's ignore the actual geography of the situation. There's one other advantage that the players for both teams are going to have compared to a normal road trip, in that they're not going to be tempted by the local entertainment scene. And the NFL has specifically instructed the players not to leave their hotel except for football activities because of security issues. And so there will be less of a distraction issue that could come into play. And I think that that's an important thing for these young players.
Well, ideally, they're traveling on Wednesday. First of all, that's going to be a long day on the plane. I think that, yeah, you're going to be ready to get some decent rest in a good bed, maybe enjoy a hot meal, hit the hot tub, whatever you can. Thursday is going to be a practice and a run-through day. And like you said, probably a lot of film to watch. And then I think along with that, getting yourself acclimated time zone wise, because again, that's a late game Friday night. They're going to be up pretty late. So yeah, fucking around town, I don't think you got time for that. It's got to be get in all business. And then when the game's over, let's get back to Green Bay and get ready for week 2. You know, it'll be a nice relaxing weekend for them after the game. Everyone else is playing on Sunday and they're going to be able to just sit around and watch football on Sunday like the rest of us.
Kind of a little mini bye right to start things off.
The only thing that we don't have going for us, even though this is to start the season, is we don't have a completely healthy team. Marshawn Lloyd is out, has basically been limited in practice and doesn't seem likely to play. And Emmanuel Wilson has also been out in practice a lot too. So Josh Jacobs may get a lot of action, John, because we may not have any other running backs that are able to go. The other player who is important to the offense who was limited was Romeo Doubs. And because of his experience, hopefully he'll still be able to play. But given the injury history, I do have concerns about Watson and Doubs and whether they're going to have that durability. And hopefully that does not become a theme of this season.
In addition to that, the field conditions, because this is a brand new, never been played. American football has been played on this field, assuming that, for soccer, that obviously this field has been used for that, but the players are a little bigger and a little more physical on this pitch, as it were. So hopefully the field will hold up, and it is a good quality field as well, and that won't have any untoward or unnecessary injuries because of it.
Well, I think we know internationally, I think soccer is pretty serious about consistency in field conditions. So it's just a matter of, Thursday, Friday, do the players get out there and run around in Corinthian Stadium to kind of get a feel for it? Ideally, there's no weird holes for standards somewhere like they had in Winnipeg in the Canadian game where they had to adjust the field size. You have to trust the league that they sent someone down there ahead of time to say, gee, is this a field that we'll be able to convert into a decent 120 yards to play football on?
And it's not going to be the field turf of the Link, which is an advantage as well.
Do we know, Neil, does it matter? Do we know the kind of the layout of the stadium? I know you did a lot of research when they went to London and the difference between the Tottenham Stadium and where else they could play. For sight lines and for cameras and things like that, is this a well-known, is this a renowned stadium in the world of soccer?
It certainly is a stadium for a very well-known, internationally known team, but I don't follow the Brazilian league the way I do the Premier League, so I don't have any special insights, but those are great questions, John.
Oh, good. We'll leave them out there for maybe our fans to answer. Thanks. And as mentioned with London, it is an international game. The second time for the regular season. There is a Canadian game in there as well. Gee, Jeff, I bet as the podcast historian, you know a little bit about some international games in the Green Bay Packers.
As a matter of fact, I do. The first professional football game played outside of the United States was in 1926 when the AFL's New York Yankees played the Los Angeles Wildcats at Toronto's Maple Leaf Stadium. The first international regular season game took place in Mexico City, maybe you remember this, on October 2nd, 2005, between the Arizona Cardinals and San Francisco 49ers. Arizona won that game 31-14 in front of 103,467 fans at Estadio Azteca. The NFL's international series began on October 28th, 2007, when the New York Giants played the Miami Dolphins at London's Wembley Stadium. To date, the Jacksonville Jaguars have played the most international regular season games with 11, and they actually have a winning record. They're 6-5 in those 11 international games. Through last season, the NFL has played a total of 50 regular season games internationally, with 36 of those games played in London, 6 in Toronto, 5 in Mexico City, while Munich has hosted 2 and Frankfurt has hosted recently 1. This year, there are 5 international games scheduled, 3 more in London, 1 in Munich, and 1 this Friday in Sao Paolo, Brazil.
And a quick look online, Jeff, I did some research while you were talking. The capacity for the FIFA World Cup in 2014, 68,727. So it's slightly smaller than what Lambeau Field would hold. And from the sounds of it, there are a lot of Packer fans in Brazil to begin with. Eagles fans think that they have a lot of flights going out of Philadelphia. Packer fans, we know, travel notoriously well. It is a home game for Philadelphia, but they chose to wear white for this game. The Packers will be in green. And despite all of the rumors and all of the dumb things that people have said online about what you should or shouldn't do in Sao Paulo or Corinthians, I think it's going to be filled with Packer green from the front row to the top row.
John, I'm still wearing my Green Bay Packers colorless jersey to match the expectation that we not wear the green.
And I have my white Reggie White. Go ahead. You were going to say something about Reggie White.
I would be wearing that if we were at the Link, but thankfully this game is not in the Link.
Well, with that, let's wrap this up and get some final thoughts. I kind of just put mine in there on what I think the stadium is going to look like and how the fans are going to be. Jeff, final thoughts?
I'm looking forward to the season. This is the Packers' second international game, but I think that they're going to react very well. They did extremely well towards the end of the season last year on national games. It's Friday night. It's going to be weird watching the Packers on a Friday night for a regular season game. Really looking forward to it. And the second official game of this season, really, really excited. I think that they're going to come out and they're going to win, and nothing would make me happier. And of course, as all Packer fans, is to not only beat the Eagles, but also have a really good showing and show what we can expect this coming year.
The start of the football season means traditions for how you start your season. And the way we celebrate the start of our seasons is that we have a crab fest for opening game where we get a bushel of crabs and we all just pick on crabs and eat crabs and beer to start the game. Now, typically that's a Sunday noon game. A Friday night crab fest is going to be fun, being together with family, watching the start of the Packers season. What I'm looking forward to most as far as the game is concerned is that we're going to get an early view of Jeff Hafley's defense. We're going to see, can Jeff Hafley's defense contain Jalen Hurts? Can this defense cause problems? Can we get disruption? Are we going to avoid those big gains that are potentially going to come from a stunting defense? We're going to learn a lot about this Packers team. We're going to learn a lot about this defense. Bring it on. Go Pack, go.
Definitely looking forward to Friday night football, not Friday night lights at high school style, but Friday night lights international style with the Packers and the Eagles. To quote Bob Costas in the movie Basketball, you're excited. Feel these nipples. All right. If you're watching us on YouTube, then please hit subscribe and leave a comment. Find the GBC podcast at Green Bay Chat. That's all one word on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, Apple Podcast, and Spotify, and on Facebook at the GBC podcast Green Bay Chat. And may you fully appreciate the magnitude of your impending good fortune. Thanks for joining us.
Good night.